Well, I appreciate everybody being here this morning. We're going to continue what we started last week, and just to review, our topic is how do we present ourselves as Christians? And we're going to read two verses that we kind of began with last week as a background for it. We're going to be reading from Romans 12, verses 1 and 2. I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. This morning we'll begin with Jason Golden beginning our comments.
So Tim read the two verses that the elders in the education committee asked us to talk about. And when they asked us to speak, I think one of the drivers for it was just the nature of people being mobile during the Christmas holiday season, that they expected that many of the classes might not have the continuity they typically have because people are traveling so much. And it's ironic that that's the case because actually my two brothers' families and my sister's family are visiting with us. So they actually came from Georgia, and I suspect many of our members are out traveling as well. So the idea was that this would be a good opportunity for us to speak as a family about how we present ourselves as Christians. And they actually gave us some specific topics. And yes, last week, Tom and Tim took primary responsibility for a couple of topics that were asked of us. And then today, Gary and I are going to take some primary responsibilities for some topics. Tom talked about in our appearance and our attitude and our conversations about others. He talked about the Israelites and how they got into the routine and habit of complaining, and what a negative driver that was, especially for the leadership for Moses. And Tim talked about how we treat others who are different from ourselves, and he gave started with a life history, really, of what he experienced as a young person in Northeast Mississippi with race, where he was born in an environment where racial discrimination was institutionalized, and the example he had of his father in trying to grow out of that, really in that context of how do you treat others who might look different from you. Today, I've been asked to speak on how we present ourselves as Christians in our presence on social media, and Gary is gonna lead the discussion in how we present ourselves as Christians in our involvement in church activities. Again, with that driver of that Bible verse that Tim gave from Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. So I inherited the social media topic. And guys, tongue in cheek, I got social media, I think, because I was late to the meeting. And it reminds me, my grandmother's congregation, she was turning 100 years old. She worshiped at a Ringgold Church of Christ just south of Chattanooga. And the leadership in that church, the elders and the minister, decided when she turned 100 that they were going to have the entire worship service led by her children and her grandchildren, her sons and her grandchildren. And I missed the family meeting, and I ended up preaching. So it sounds like that's what I've got with social media, because social media is really a tool that is relatively new, available to us, that I think and I hope that you guys recognize really just reflects human nature, and that the biblical principles of how we communicate with each other certainly apply in this relatively new tool of social media. So I want to start with this question, at the risk of being in an auditorium class. How many of you use social media to receive, to get information, to get your news? How many of you, to some degree or another, use social media to get your news? So it looks to be like maybe 80% or so. So in an auditorium class, I'm guessing that's really closer to 100% with that. Thank you for laughing at that. So how many of you will actually share information on social media from time to time? Not nearly as much. So largely, this group is getting their information from social media. So I'm going to talk about that a little bit. Just like anything else, social media is a tool to receive information. And I want to start with Proverbs chapter 4, verse 23. For me, the daily life can be better if you are using what Solomon has shared, that wisdom he has shared, that has survived millennia and has survived so much human history. In Proverbs 4, verse 23, I'm going to paraphrase that, but I invite you guys to pull that up. Above all else, guard your heart, for everything you do flows from it. Above all else, guard your heart. And what I have come to the conclusion on with social media, and I see this in my work, is you have a greater opportunity with social media, not only for tools to do good, but to have your heart unguarded, because there is so much available, and it's so available so quickly that we need to be careful. Solomon wrote that, inspired by God, thousands of years ago, and it's just as true today, perhaps even more true, because the risk for your heart being affected is so much higher out there, especially given the way you guys raised your hands. How did you receive information, those of you who are 50 plus? How did you used to receive your information? You used to receive it largely, I guess, from a news perspective, from television news, from print media. And it reminds me of a conversation that I heard, I'm going to estimate maybe 10 years ago or so, from a school administrator who had been going around doing seminars on how to deal with tragedies at schools. This happened to be the result of a school shooting, and a school administrator spent time going around talking to school leaders about how to deal with that kind of tragedy. And one of the content areas he talked about was media. And he basically told this story that stuck with me. When media arrives after a bad event, they want to get the information out. They want to be truthful, but they have to get it out quick. And they are going to go to the most reliable source to get that information and then turn around and share with people. And if that happens to be a 7th grader, that's who they're using. And his point was, be available to media so that the truth can be shared, the reality can be shared. But if they can't get the truth as you know it, they're going to get the truth as somebody knows it, whether it's accurate or not. And that was back in the era of print media and television media. And I would submit to you that there's still some of that on social media, but that's not all of it. There are a lot of sources who aren't intending to try to get the facts as best they can. The scope of sources in social media are so much more broad than what so many of us grew up with. And the intent of it may not be what those traditional media sources are. They may be very different. Their intent and their intended result may be very different. It may not be honest. It may be driven by a conclusion before the facts got there. And so now more than ever, I would submit to you that that proverb of guard your heart is more important. You can hit some items on social media that may not be factually accurate. You can hit some items on social media that may not be true. And remember, the elders asked us to talk about how do we present ourselves as Christians. I would suggest that you be careful about sticking to just one source over and over and over again if you're not confident that that source is designed to give you the truth, because you can get caught up in things that aren't true. And I've seen that over and over again in my work. I'm in school administration, and now more than ever, I'm spending time correcting rumors. I've had folks come to me at church and say, I hear you guys do blank. That's totally absurd. I would suggest to you that if it sounds totally absurd, it may be. But to those who have come to me with that, I appreciate them asking. And and I'll say something like, "Don't believe everything you read," or something like that. It's just simply not true. So fundamentally, I think there's some wisdom in guarding your heart, just like Solomon told us. Now, I also want to try to address this on the positive side as well, from what we take in. Philippians chapter 4, verse 8 stuck out to me, and it's amazing. I'm not going to hit all the scriptures that I pulled out because this is the discussion time. We don't have a ton of time, but guys, it was amazing to me how many of that collection of Paul's letters I found myself going to when I cycled through this idea of how we're taking in information. Galatians, Ephesians, Philippians, Colossians, just over and over again, there's wisdom from Paul that I think guides us in how we receive information and how it affects our heart. But I just want to read just a little bit from Philippians chapter 4, verse 8. Finally, brethren, whatever things are true, whatever things are noble, whatever things are just, whatever things are pure, whatever things are lovely, whatever things are of good report, if there is any virtue and if there is anything praiseworthy, meditate on these things. When you're looking at social media, are you doing that? Are you looking at things that are pure? Are you looking at information that's noble? I think that's something that we who have chosen that as a source need to always be thinking of. Are we focused on those things in what we're doing? So with that, I'm going to leave that topic, and I want to flip to the second question I asked, which is, what do you share? Related to that, I want to jump to another one of Paul's letters that I just referenced, Ephesians chapter 4, verse 32. I want to read that. And be kind to one another, tender-hearted, forgiving one another, even as God in Christ forgave you. For those of us who post, are we applying those Christian principles? Are we presenting ourselves as Christians in what we post on social media? And I know many of us are. I've seen a lot of positive information from it. My sister is sitting over here somewhere, I think. There she just waved. She keeps me informed on what's going on with the area I grew up, because she's on social media and she's receiving information. And it's positive, what she shares. It may be sad information from time to time, but she shares information because she's maintaining those relationships in North Atlanta, the area that I grew up. It's funny, last night we were exchanging Christmas presents, et cetera, and she was pulling up some information on some of my high school classmates, information I didn't know. She's been positive, and it's been a great example for me of what she shares. But are we doing that? Are we behaving as Christians in what we share? And I think of a story. Friends of mine at our congregation years ago, before Shelley and I moved up here, I was approached by our elders to help out with a problem that a couple of my brothers, my friends, had on social media. And I'm smiling because this was intended as a joke between two friends as they were going back and forth on social media. And because I knew them, I immediately knew they were being humorous with each other. But the impact on others who might not have known them, might not have known the relationship, could have been different. And I gave you that preface to tell you this story. One of our friends wrote on social media, as they were kind of bantering back and forth, if you believe that, you're going to hell. And it was intended as a joke. The context was political, but it was intended as a joke between two friends who disagreed with each other on political issues. But others read it. Others read it, and it ultimately had a negative impact on those others who read it. And it frightened a couple of our church leaders who asked me to try to resolve this conflict between those two. There was no conflict. They were just playing with each other. So I think there's some wisdom in recognizing who your audience is when you post on social media. Your audience may be broader than you think it is. What you may be able to share just in humorous situations with close friends has the potential to be observed by everybody across the world if you're not careful. And then shared and shared and shared. So I think the wisdom there, especially with the elders suggesting to us that we need to talk about social media, is be careful who your audience is. Be careful who you're presenting to as Christians. And I think intellectually we all know that, but you have the potential to get caught up in posting things. Another human nature truism, I suspect, is it's easier to be decent to somebody when you're face to face with them. And when you've got that barrier where you don't have to look at somebody, I have seen too many times in my life, whether it's personal life or professional life, it's easier to be harsh with somebody if you don't have to look at them, if you don't have that direct relationship. And that's new. Solomon told us there's nothing new under the sun. The tools have changed in the millennia since Solomon wrote that, but human behavior hasn't changed. There's nothing new under the sun in human behavior. There's nothing new under the sun in sin. There's nothing new under the sun in error. But the tools we have to use, we need to be careful with, because most any tool has the potential to be a tool for good or a tool for bad. So be careful would be another item. Recognize who your audience is when you're sharing with social media. Given that we have that responsibility as Christians to present ourselves. Final thing I want to mention before I turn it over for you guys to contribute is I thought about Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, and I want to read a little bit. From Matthew chapter 5. That those of us who grew up studying the Bible would recognize, and I know we may have some folks who might not, but might not recognize this. But in Matthew chapter 5, Jesus spoke these items. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. And I'm going to drop down a little bit to this, which I think is a key item for what we share as Christians on social media. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. In what we post, are we living as a Christian? Are we making peace with what we post on social media? Are we creating peace with how we communicate? I think it's easier when you're one-on-one. But if we're in the habit of posting, my suggestion to you is remind yourself when you're getting ready to hit send that we do have that responsibility as Christians to live as a Christian no matter where we are, no matter what we're using as a tool. And we could extend that even beyond that. We could extend that to driving down the interstate, right, or whatever. Are we making peace as we drive? Now, that one popped into my head because, guys, I'm not sure I do that all the time. But you may have something in your life that may be a challenge for you in how you make peace as a Christian. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. And isn't that how we know that we're children of God? When we became Christians, we took on that honor and that hope of being children of God and having that hope of heaven that Bill talked about this morning. Are we living that in everything we do? So that's kind of a prompt for you guys. So anyone want to grab the microphone and share your thoughts related to that? Tim?
All right, one of the things I thought about when Jason asked hands to go up, my mom passed away in 2017. She was 85 when she died. About 2 or 3 years before she died, I feel my phone vibrate. When I had a chance to look at it, I looked, and I had a text message from my mom. She was well over 80. And I was kind of shocked. And I opened it up, and it said, I learned how to text. Aren't you proud of me? And I was, but I replied to her, and they say you can't teach an old dog new tricks, which she got a kick out of my reply, too. But the last few years of her life, we texted each other. And that was a lot of fun. One of the things that Jason said a minute ago reminded me of a experience I had probably about 20 to 25 years ago. There are probably some Atlanta Braves fans in here, and y'all might remember this. Most of y'all won't remember this incident, but y'all might remember this. They had a pitcher named John Rocker. And John Rocker's career with the Braves basically ended when a hit piece on him appeared in ESPN. The hit piece was written by a reporter who spent a year or two working as the high school writer here in town at the Tennessean. And I had experience with this writer. I was coaching track at Lipscomb, and I was directing a regional track meet that involved about 1,000 athletes from about 40 schools. And this reporter was sent to cover the track meet. And we'd had an amazing track meet. We'd had several regional records. We had a lot of people qualifying for the state meet. Just some incredible stories. So he came up to me and said, I've got to have a story in tomorrow morning. I want you to tell me some things that have happened in this track meet. So I started going through the records that had been broken, the people that were the top seeded people in their events in the state. And he just smiled and said, that's really nice, but that's not what I'm looking for. I'm looking for controversy. I'm looking for things that are going to be exciting. I'm looking for things that are going to get headlines and get people to read what I'm writing. Have you got anything like that? And I said, well, I'm sorry, I've just got region records and people qualifying for the state. I don't have anything like you're mentioning that you want for your article. Well, when I read the stuff that he had written about John Rocker, at first I started reading and I was thinking, man, this is awful. I can't believe this guy said all these things. And then I saw the author of it and I thought, this may not be exactly what is being written. And I don't know why I did this, but I looked up on Google. I found out where John Rocker was from. And I sent a letter to his home address in Macon, Georgia, just describing my experience with this particular writer because he was claiming his innocence. And I sent a letter, and about 2 weeks later, I had a message that was left in the office where I worked that said, you need to call this number. This lady says it's really important that she talk to you. And it happened to be John Rocker's mom. So I called her when I had the chance, and we spent over an hour talking. And she went, I don't know about, John is not a perfect person, but he is not who was represented in this article. He is beside himself. He feels like he got baited in. He feels like he got prodded, he got set up, and he got taken out of context. And a lot of things he said that are not him at all. And he's going to lose his job over this. And she said, I need you to do me a favor. And she gave me 2 addresses that she wanted me to send a letter to. One of them was the president and general manager of the Braves. The other was Hank Aaron. So I sent a letter to Hank Aaron. He never called me back. I left him my information. But I remember watching Hank Aaron break Babe Ruth's record when I was in school. And here I'm sending a letter to him. But the point is, sometimes when you read sensationalized things, as Jason said, it may not be true. And you need to be very careful about what you share. There used to be somebody that shared a lot with me and other people. I was just on a distribution list with probably 15 or 20 other people. Some of the stuff that was shared was political. Some of the stuff was about church issues. And some of the time, preachers were named. And some of the things that were being shared weren't true. And there were several times I replied back to the person, you need to follow this up because what you just said wasn't true. One time it was something about Cree Hall, and it was not true. Finally, that person, I don't know if they still do that or not, but they took me off their list. But we need to be very, very careful about what we share with others.
Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you with all malice.
talking, that we might be moody today, and we can change our moods pretty quickly. But once those words are out there, people have been reminded that they are out there and they can stay. Now, the Bible says we must have communication. We provide a way of salvation for people by words, So sometimes, somewhere the Bible calls preaching foolishness, but that's what we have to have in order to provide salvation. There was a rumor going along the line a long time ago. I don't think it's a rumor, but I think most of us have a cell phone. And I remember reading a story that Elvis Presley would shoot his television. When somebody would come up, but they asked him, well, who did you just shoot? He said, I just shot Robert Goulet. I didn't like him singing. Well, I kind of know how he feels, because Lillian has to repair my cell phone, so I can't get it right. But we still must have words to convince us to repent and obey. But it's dangerous. A few days ago, I was out at a dealership, an automobile dealership in Cool Springs, and they had it all blocked off, and you couldn't get back in there to where the vehicles were without going inside and having somebody walk around with you. So I was going to get my car serviced, and I saw a friend of mine in there, and I said, what are you doing? He said, these kids have learned to start these new cars with their laptop, with no keys in them. And they're shucking those cars out of there just because they have learned to start them. How important words are. When I still remember my 4-year-old Sunday school teacher. She was spectacular, and I always wanted to hear about Noah. And she said, Noah just said a very, very few words. Well, I wanted to hear it over and over again, Miss Clark. And she would tell this about Noah and how he started preaching. And she said this was a great big city. He was in a big fish, and that he started preaching. And I said, well, I don't believe he looked too good. If he'd been in a fish for about 3 or 4 days, he probably scared those people. And I said, well, what did he say? And she would repeat, I just wanted to hear it over and over again. Yet 40 days, and Nineveh will be destroyed. 8 words. God says, I am going to tell you what to say. There were 120 children in there, in this city. It was thought there were about 600,000 people in there. So if you think words are important, remember those 8 words. Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be destroyed. So we still have to have words. And while Jason was talking, I was talking about how they can ruin somebody's reputation. Thou shalt not steal. You can steal someone's reputation by saying something that's false, just like Jason said. You can repeat something, and once it's out there, it's out there. But remember, words are what provide an access to salvation for people. Yet 40 days, and Nineveh shall be destroyed. Those 8 words convinced an entire city. It was thought there were about 600,000 people in there. He walked in there, I remember it vividly. He walked one day inside the city and just talked. So words are important.
Just a couple of thoughts. For those who don't know, I work with college students, and I can tell you that some college students' futures have been torn in shambles because of what they put on the internet. Because employers do check. They do check social media. So we as Christians need to use wisdom. And I'm always reminded of the verse, "By this all men will know that you are my disciples." Well, how are people to know that we're the disciples, we're the students of Christ, we're the followers of Christ? Jesus says, by the love you have one for another. And like Jason said, it's so easy to write something harsh and bad about somebody because you don't see them. Now, I have to text. I have students who text. I have students who email. This is how they communicate. But I am old-fashioned. I like to talk to somebody face to face. That way you can get rid of any misunderstandings when you talk to somebody face to face. So we need to use wisdom, but the internet and all this is neither good nor bad. It's like Jason said, you can do a lot of good things with it. But I will tell you this also, just as an aside, again, from working with college students. I've had several college students who have confided to me that they struggle with pornography. And the internet is where it all started, and where most of them continue their addiction. That is one of the major uses of the internet, is pornography. And some of that came from social media originally. And they got trapped again. They got trapped into the addiction because they didn't guard their hearts, like Jason said. I'll end off with this. The old saying that with computer science is true: garbage in, garbage out. If we let garbage in our minds, that's what's going to come out in our lives. And so we need to be guarding our hearts, like Jason said. Anything else before I start? In going back to Romans chapter 12, in the very first verse, "Therefore I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship." And that one of the ideas that the elders wanted us to talk about was our involvement in church activities. And some involvement has gone down because of the pandemic, since the pandemic. And a lot of people, again, are on the internet. And they do more things on the internet rather than in person. And so I wanted to look at this from the points of view of people that might say, give certain arguments against being involved in church activities. Now, I may be speaking to the choir here, I don't know. But some people will argue, well, you know, in that first verse of Romans chapter 12, first of all, it talks about worship. It's not talking about being involved in service activities or activities of the church. It's just talking about worship. Well, the word that's used there is also used in a bad sense in John chapter 16, verse 2. Same word. And listen to the context. "They will put you out of the synagogue. Indeed, the hour is coming when anyone who kills you will think he is offering a service to God." Same word, service, worship service. It's not just talking about what we do in the assembly here. It's talking about what we do in our lives to worship, to service God. So it's more than just prayer. It's more than just singing. It's more than just giving. It's more than just taking the Lord's Supper. A second objection, I hear this, and sometimes I give some of this same idea in my own head. I'm serving God by taking care of my family. I don't have time to get involved in all these activities in the church. Well, I looked up, I looked at several sources. I used the internet. Looked up several sources here about how do we spend our time in general in America. Now, some of these come from different studies. This first one comes from a government study that I guess they do every year. It's called the American Time Use Survey. Here's what they said. On the average day, this is the average American, on the average day, we sleep 9.07 hours. Well, they didn't ask me. I don't get that much sleep. Leisure and sports, 5.15 hours. Working and work-related activities, 3.56 hours. Now, you got to realize these are 15 years and older in general, the average American. And I'll put a asterisk behind that work. I'll give you another statistic here in a second. And household activities, 1.92 hours a day on the average. For those who work, that 3.56 hours jumps up to 8.13 hours. Also, this is for a lifetime. Here's some statistics. Again, remember I'm a math guy, so I like stats. We spend in a lifetime 28 years, 2 months, and 5 days sleeping. We spend 15 years, 8 months, and 7 days working and doing work-related activities. Listen to this one. We spend 13 years, 11 months, and 9 days including leisure activities, holidays, vacation, things like that. 7 years, 7 months, and 6 days doing household activities. 6 years, 3 months, and 15 days caring for children. 5 years, 7 months, and 13 days socializing and communication. We spend 4 years eating and drinking. We spend 1 year, 5 months, and 16 days just traveling to work. Also, in one research, one person did, this is back to yearly, we will spend 37 hours just waiting in line per year. 37 hours. Also, we will spend 13 hours waiting on hold on the phone per year. And I just looked up this just for interest's sake. If you plan a vacation and you want to go to Disney, did you know that only 17% of your time will be spent on the rides while there? Only 17% of the time. We talk about time. We waste a lot of time. We don't use time to God's glory a lot a lot of time. Another study said that on the average day, this is average per day, in 2023, the U.S. population only spent 3.6 minutes in formal religious practices. Only 3.6 minutes. When you talk about personal service, a religious service, or devotionals, we spent 6.6 minutes per day. 6.6 minutes per day. Here's the thing. We find time to do what we want. Is God most important in our lives? That's the bottom line. Is God number one in our lives, or do we have more than one ruler of our life? Which, of course, Jesus said can't happen. Either you love God or you love the world. There is no in between. So when it comes to church activities, now it doesn't mean we do everything. But we've got to find something that we can do to the glory of God. There are people out there, as Brother Bill talked about, people dying. There's people dying spiritually. And we spend more time planning vacations sometime than caring about one another. And I understand we all need rest. We do all need rest. The problem is rest, if you look at it, vacation and holiday and all that leisure time has become a god in our society. It outnumbers a great portion of our life. In Hebrews chapter 10, let us hold fast the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who promised is faithful. And let us consider how to stimulate one another to love and good works, not forsaking our own assembly together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day drawing near. We need to be encouraging one another to do good deeds, to be involved in one another's lives, to help one another, to be spreading the word. Which brings me to another objection that sometimes we give. I can't do anything. I'm not the person who can get up there in front of people. I can't talk to people. I can't do this. I can't do that. It's sort of like Moses when he was talking to God. I'm bad at speech. In 1 Corinthians chapter 12, and we don't have time to read it all, starting is the whole chapter. Just go home. I'll give you homework since I'm a teacher. Go home and read 1 Corinthians chapter 12. Every single person here is important. Just like members of the body. Now, I know it's talking about spiritual gifts. When you get to 1 Corinthians 12, it's talking about spiritual gifts. But the same idea can be applied to our talents, to our gifts as people. This church, this congregation will not grow if we aren't involved. But we pay the preacher. That's we pay the preacher to do all this. No, the church grew in the first century because the Christians spread the word. It didn't say the preacher spread the word. It said the Christians went out and spread the word. Oh, but we're not the elders or the deacons. Again, it didn't say the elders and deacons. It said the Christians. Everybody. It takes each of us, just as it takes our hand and our feet and our mouths and our ears and our head and our eyes. It takes our whole body to live. If somebody is not doing what they can, then the church is hurting. We need everybody to be involved, some form or fashion. It doesn't have to be one of the many ministries we have. Do something on your own. But be active. You know why? And here's the bottom line. And I'll be ending up on this. There's no fear in love, but perfect love casts out fear, because fear involves punishment, and the one who fears is not perfected in love. And listen to this verse. We love because he first loved us, 1 John chapter 4. And then combine that with John 14. John's the writer of love. If you love me, you will keep my commandments. And you say, well, where's his commandment about service and being involved in church activities? Well, I'll end off on this verse. Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10. For we are his workmanship, created in Christ Jesus. Listen to this. Created in Christ Jesus for good works, which God prepared beforehand so that we would walk in them. God saved us to be with him, but he also saved us to be working, to be doing his will, to be sharing the greatest news of all, the news about Christ. It should come out of our lives. It should be a part of our lives. This is our family right here. These are our brothers and sisters right here. This is where we should be spending our time, helping one another and doing good works and spreading the good news about Jesus to save the world. Now, I think we're out of time, but
We're going to turn it back over to Tim, I guess, to close us out.
Okay. One very, very quick thought on what Gary said. There was a documentary a couple of years ago about a football team at Warren Central High School in Mississippi, and it was called 11 Brothers, and it was based on the topic, 11 brothers are hard to beat. In the church, when we're acting as brothers, we're going to be committed, and it's going to be really hard for us to give it up and walk away. Because if you're committed to something, you're not going to leave it. Appreciate y'all being here. Hope everybody has a wonderful holiday season. Hope you get to spend time with family and friends. And next week, we'll be back in here and be hearing from Dennis Johnson, who's a missionary in India. Thank you.